Ladies and gentlemen, welcome after the break. I hope you had some rest. The second part of the day looks at least as interesting as the first one. We are continuing the discussion on the EU digital policy, and I'm honored to introduce Mr. Kilian Gross, Head of Technologies and Systems for the Digitising Industry Unit at the DigiConnect European Commission, who will present the development of the European AI policy and how Europe is going to achieve the goal of being a global leader in innovation in the data economy and its applications. Mr. Gross, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Barbara. That's most kind for this very pleasant introduction. I'm very pleased to be here today because it's an important moment. We all see now and during these days of crisis how important digital technologies are, because without them we would not even be able to work. And at least like this we can connect and I can share some views with you. And I know you have a very sophisticated and outstanding audience, so I'm very happy to hear your views and to share a bit my ideas with you. I will give you a short overview about the white paper, which the Commission has presented on the 19th of February on artificial intelligence. And if time allows, perhaps at the end, we can still then have a number of some small questions. I will now try to start the presentation. Here. The background of this white paper is, of course, that we didn't start from scratch, because there was already quite some work inside the Commission and outside going on artificial intelligence. And it started basically with the, as you know, we had a high-level expert group, which is still working and evaluating the criteria and the requirements which they developed. And at the same time, the Commission has in the years 2018 and 19 already come out with 3 different pieces of work, to which I will refer later, which have a bit done the preparatory work for the white paper, which we have now since 19th of February. The white paper as such is built on a double strategy. On the one hand side, we want to push for innovation. We want to push for uptake of artificial intelligence, because we believe it's a groundbreaking technology which can bring a lot of benefit to our economy and to our society. At the same time, we acknowledge that there are certain risks, and therefore we want to prepare for a solid regulatory framework which allows to say that artificial intelligence made in Europe is safe. So we distinguish therefore an ecosystem of excellence, which we try to set up, and an ecosystem of trust, which should then be the regulatory part of the exercise. Looking backwards, what has the Commission done so far? Here you see the Commission has already developed its strategy on artificial intelligence in April 2018. What we basically had set out that we wanted to go for artificial intelligence, but it should be a human-centered artificial intelligence. So already there was the idea that we want to compete, but we want to do it the European way. So we want to be, in a way, not like perhaps the Chinese, which have a lot of data, or the Americans, but we want to do it in our way, and to be human-centered. We then followed up on that strategy in December 2018 with a coordinated plan. We then followed up with a communication on the coordinated plan, where we set out around 70 initiatives how to boost artificial intelligence. In particular, we asked member states to develop national strategies on artificial intelligence, which should be coordinated and developed further than on European level in order to come to a coordinated approach. Finally, in April 2019, we came out with a communication on building trust in human-centric artificial intelligence. There, we basically took up the key findings of the high-level expert group, and we established the 7 requirements for trustworthy AI. So, if you look then backwards, what did the high-level group on artificial intelligence do? Here, I just said it. They developed 7 requirements for in their ethics guidelines for trustworthy artificial intelligence. And these 7 requirements include, in particular, human agency and oversight, robustness, privacy and data governance, transparency, diversity, non-discrimination, fairness, societal and environmental well-being, and accountability. And this list offers a guidance how artificial intelligence should be developed and deployed. And what we're doing now, what the high-level group is still acting on, is checking how these requirements can work in practice and how they can be translated into practical tool sets or checklists in order to make it workable. In addition, the high-level group published as well policy and investment recommendations for trustworthy AI, where they gave their views on how AI could be supported. At the same time, because we're not working in isolation, we had an expert group mainly run by DG Grow on liability and new technologies, where we checked already which kind of legislation which is enforced on product liability and safety, be it sectorial, be it horizontal, might need amendments in order to be fully up to the challenge of artificial intelligence. The whole work was then speeded up basically by the incoming president, Ursula von der Leyen, who gave as one of her key visions for a Europe fit for the digital age, a clear objective to come out with an legislation on artificial intelligence. You can see here the quote from her political guidelines. So she wants a European approach on the human and ethical applications of artificial intelligence, which should be put down into a law. And that was basically our mission on which we worked when we started to develop the white paper process, which was then published on the 19th of February and which may, depending of course on the outcome of the public consultation, end up in legislation at the end of this year in Q4, if things go according to plan, which is of course now a bit more doubtful due to the corona crisis. If we now look, we followed again in this white paper, which is of course still a rather open document because it's a white paper. So we still look for basically questions. We put up topics, we raise issues, but we do not always have conclusions or final solutions. But we have again the structure of these two pillars. On the one hand side, excellence, we want to boost. On the other hand, regulatory framework. On the excellence side, we identify 6 key actions which we think are crucial in order to improve the uptake and development of artificial intelligence. The first one is, as I said, to work with member states. We need to revise the coordinated plan, which we have developed in 2018 with the 70 actions. And we want to look at the national strategies and to see if they can be, what is best practice, what can be done better, where we have benchmarks, and how we could come to a more European vision and what we could do on European level. Second, we will strengthen our efforts in research and innovation. Therefore, we will look for AI research excellence centers, and we will set up testing and experimentation sites. Both are central needs because we need some centers of really world-class excellence, and we need as well large-scale experimentation sites where big companies can, or small companies can try and test out their artificial intelligence. We will need to work on the skills, because this is, of course, a key concern of a lot of citizens, that AI will have a tremendous effect on jobs, in particular on employment and employees, because a lot of standardized or routine tasks will in the future be done by artificial intelligence. Therefore, we need to, first, on the one hand side, we need to improve talent in order to have sufficient workforce for the needs to develop AI, but second as well, in order to allow the current workforce to find new and adequate jobs in this new working environment. All this is in particular challenge for SMEs, because they often, and that is what we see in our analysis of markets, we often see that SMEs do not have a sufficient degree of digitalization already. And for them, of course, AI is an additional challenge in order to overcome the hurdle to really fully digitize. Therefore, we will use the digital innovation hubs, which we have created under the Digitising European Industry strategy, in order to allow better access to digital technologies for SMEs, and to allow them easier ways to finance or to find equity in order to deploy and develop AI. So the idea is that in every member state, we should at least have one innovation hub, which should be fully specialized on AI, and which should then be part of the network of innovation hubs specialized in that area. At the same time, we know that we need to work with the private sector, because the public sector will not be alone able to develop or to provide the necessary funds in order to do this technological development. And therefore, we will create a new PPP, which will a private-public partnership on AI, data, and robotics, which will replace the current PPP on robotics, but it's much more comprehensive because it will as well comprise AI and data. And this is, by the way, one side remark, a good reason to put AI and data together. This was as well the reason why we on 19th of February put out together the data strategy and the white paper on AI, because both are in our view two elements of a single strategy, because you need data, a flourishing data economy to boost AI, and AI can of course be very helpful for the data economy. So both are linked. And that's why on 19th of February, beside the chapeau communication on shaping Europe's digital future, we had the two texts in front of us. And last but not least, we want to use AI more in the public sector, because the public sector could be a front runner for AI. And therefore, we will try to have sector dialogues and to see to which extent we can ensure that in call for tenders, for instance, or in public procurement, AI solutions are given preference. So in order to develop trustworthy AI and therefore to showcase to everybody the output of an AI to use there for the public sector. This is one of our pillar activities we want to take. So these are the 6 key elements of the ecosystem of excellence, so where we want to boost AI. And on the other hand, we have the ecosystem of trust, which goes together. And we think it's not really, there is no contradiction between the two, because only an AI which is really trustworthy will have a quick uptake in the market, and is therefore will therefore be rewarded from the citizens. So it is in the interest in the end of as well of the operators to have an AI which is trustworthy. So we think it's in the interest of citizens and as well of the economy to have a trustworthy AI. In order to do so, we need to identify what are really risky AI systems. We need to see what could be mandatory requirements for these high-risk systems. How could they be enforced? And what could happen to all the other systems which are not identified as a high risk? And then there's a bit of a special case, the remote biometric identification, which, as you could already see, raises particular concerns. So if you go a bit more in detail on these questions or key components of our strategy, you see why do we need this ecosystem of trust. Here, our key point is that we do not really want to create new rights for citizens or extend the rights as they stand on privacy or freedom of expression or human dignity. We see more risks that these rights might be violated in a new way, in a way which is more difficult to avoid, and it might even be more difficult to enforce the protection of these rights or the compliance. So it's more about enforcement and compliance than new rights, but there is indeed, in our view, a risk, in particular for fundamental rights, namely non-discrimination or human rights. The other element is safety of individuals, which can be physical safety or damage to property, which is in particular, of course, in question when you have AI, which is embedded in physical systems like robots or drones or things alike. And then, of course, last but not least, you have the functioning of the legal regime, so being the liability question, which may be difficult because AI may cause difficult questions on liability, in particular, for instance, on self-learning systems, where the question who should be liable and how the liability should be allocated between the different actors in the value chain may be complex to address. We think that it is urgent to do these things, to tackle these issues, because the lack of trust might lead to hold back the uptake of AI, and the legal certainty might be as well helpful for companies. So we try to have a balanced approach, not to overregulate, not to make it too difficult for companies to invest or to come up with new ideas, but at the same time to ensure that the AI in the end is trustworthy. By doing so, we want to minimize risks, notably the most significant ones, and we want to make sure that all the legislation is properly enforced. And that leads us to the conclusion that we do not want to regulate on all AI systems, but we think that at least in the first step, we should only regulate on high-risk AI systems, because AI is omnipresent, even if a lot of people in public soundings do not realize how often every day they are in contact with AI, even if they use their smartphone regularly. But we want to concentrate on high-risk systems, where we think there is a serious danger. And so far in the white paper, we put up 2 criteria, which should normally be cumulatively applied. So it should be a certain sector, and it should be a specific use. It means, for instance, if you have the health sector, not every AI used in healthcare should be considered as high risk, because, for instance, a system which organizes the parking spots in a hospital is certainly not high risk, even if it might be related to healthcare. On the other hand, in the healthcare sector, you have certain applications which are of high risk, and these should be identified. So you should have a cumulative set of criteria to identify which are areas like healthcare, transport, and these areas are here which are given are just by example. There is not yet a decision which areas we will take in the end, and we will need further reflection and discussion what are good areas or what are good criteria to identify, because we want to have a limited list, but a very clear set of criteria, so that economic operators do not need to notify or to check just because of uncertainty. There might be other systems, exceptionally, which are irrespective of the sector, have to be considered as high risk. These might be recruitment, because here there's a risk that historical data, you might have undiscovered discriminations, or you might prolong discriminations into the future. And there's a second question on remote biometric identification. Then, if you identify a sector as high risk, the question would of course arise, how can we ensure that the risks are appropriately addressed? And here we are largely inspired by the work of the high-level expert groups, to which I referred in the beginning of my little presentation. And we try to develop some criteria, but of course here there's further work will be needed. One criterion would be training data. So the data sets which are used must be of high quality, and they must respect EU rules and values. This means it's not only that the data must be accurate, but as well the collection of the data should have normally been done without violating rules on privacy or for instance, on the GDPR. There should be a certain record keeping, because it must be possible that afterwards in an investigation, it could be found out why a mistake has happened. Therefore, relevant data and programming and methodologies must be kept by the operators. There should be sufficient information about the AI's performance and existence as such. So the individual should normally know when he or she is dealing with an AI system, in particular when it's a high-risk system, and what the AI system is doing. Very important for us is robustness and accuracy, because the more AI systems are used in high-risk areas and the more autonomous they work, the more important it's of course that they work in a robust and accurate way. So error rates of 1 to 2% might be acceptable in low-risk areas. In high-risk areas, this might not be enough. And last but not least, we think it is very important to have a human oversight, because we need to see that the human is in the loop, or if important decisions are taken, that in the end, the human being is able to take these decisions and not the machine. Okay, then we go on. We have the risk, the ex-ante conformity assessment. So the way how we should do it, we think for the time being, we should do a conformity assessment, which could be a mix of ex-ante and ex-post. We will try to integrate it as much as possible in existing structures, for instance, of type approval, so not to create new processes. These assessment could include testing, inspection, and certification. So they must be adapted to the different characteristics of the different AIs. For the part of AI systems which are not covered, which are not considered to be high risk, we will, of course, the normal rules will be applicable. They need to respect GDPR and other rules as well. And it will offer a voluntary label. That could be a kind of a qualitative assessment, which could be used for the operators in order to sell their product, to show that these products respect our fundamental rights and values and are trustworthy. Last but not least, remote biometric identification. Here, we think we have already a number of rules, because the general data protection rules apply, but and normally you need a legal basis, or you need an impact assessment by the data protection authority. But we think it's justified to have a public discussion about the use of biometric identification. So we think it would be useful to decide whether we need on European level rules in order to distinguish when this technology should be used or not. The white paper was accompanied by a report on safety and liability, which touches on the other issues, so more on the existing legislation and the ways this legislation should be amended. and which I think is very interesting and will lead certainly to modifications of the secondary legislation probably beginning of next year. And it was a starting point of a public consultation, and I could only invite you to participate in this debate today or in writing in this public consultation. So for today, thanks a lot for your attention. And here you see the quote of our executive vice president, who again stresses we want to do it differently. We want to do it the European way, and that's, I think, the best way to end. Thanks.